All right, let us get started with this week's lecture. I know you've been seeing me very frequently these past couple of weeks, but Julia's not feeling so well today, so she can't come and do the design lecture. But yeah, hopefully you guys are all doing well, staying safe like always. Hopefully daylight savings hasn't affected you too much. Maybe, hopefully not. But yeah, and again, hopefully midterm season is going okay. Well, next week is spring break. We're like almost halfway through the week, guys. Almost there. So cool. Anyways, uh, this week for the design lecture, we're going to be learning about motion, flow, and aesthetics. Really fancy words or very aesthetic words, in my opinion, but we'll get to know what they mean in a bit. But we got to do some announcements before that. So if you haven't finished midterm project yet, that's due tonight. Make sure you submit. I want to emphasize you submit both on Portal and our Google form, because the Google form is where you like attach your link and then also your write-up too. If you do not submit on one of the two, then you're going to lose points. So make sure you have it both submitted by tonight. Um, yeah, otherwise, if you finished, great job. I hope you had at least like some fun doing it. I know like it's like not the best time to do a project with midterm season, but hopefully you guys got a glimpse of how like web design is truly like in real life. Um, and maybe you're inspired for the final project later on. Assignments are resuming this week, so homework 6 is released now. It's out, and you'll be designing like loading animations. So today's lecture is on animations and like motion, things like that. So yeah, and this homework is due in 2 weeks, not next week, but in 2 weeks. So it's the Tuesday after spring break. So you have like 2 weeks to work on this. Just because who wants homework over break? That's nasty. So yeah. And the most important announcement I feel like for this week is Thursday lab is project presentation. So when coming into the Zoom call Thursday, we won't be breaking out into our cohorts. We would rather stay in the main room and have the top midterm project selections present during lab. And it's honestly a really, really fun time seeing like all like what your classmates really did and like truly get inspired. Because I feel like, in my opinion, it's like a really good way to learn how to design through seeing good designs from other people. So definitely come out and support your classmates. And if that's not enough reason for you, we are giving 2 extra credit points for you to come out the whole time and watch and participate. And then also fill out our mid-semester survey form at the end. And don't just come at the end for the mid-semester survey. We have technology is very advanced and we'll be checking if you stayed the whole time. But definitely just come out to just, I don't know, vibe with your classmates, especially it's really weird in Zoom now, but let's see what a lot of people made during this midterm project time. So yeah, extra credit, yay. And of course we have office hours and our feedback form as usual. Cool, so let's talk about motion and flow. So I just briefly mentioned this earlier. This lecture, at least programming, is about CSS animations, and this is like our last lecture on CSS before we get into JavaScript after spring break. And so I think it's much more important to understand like when to use animations versus when we show you how to do it, because it's really fancy. Like these animations, so far you've been playing with like static websites that just like stay there. Nothing like moves. Like maybe a hover effect might improve like a UI enhancement here and there for a button. But besides that, like there's really nothing like too special about a website. So with animations, it does give a lot of different personalities, but sometimes as a new designer, you might get carried away because it looks really fancy. And that's not something we want you to do, because we want you to understand what's important on a website and what's not. So this is why I'm teaching you the design section first today. And so, yeah, let's take a look at this example PayPal receipt animation. Honestly, it looks really good. I really like this design because it's really clean. It uses a lot of good visual hierarchy and spacing, and it shows everything I need on a receipt. Overall, really great design. Props to whoever made this. And you're probably thinking the same thing, like, oh, this is such a good design. I would love to use something like this. This animation is really great. I could use it on my website if I could, things like that. But I will have to say and disagree with you on the fact that it's a bad design simply because of the animation. And you're like, what? Like, no way. It's so nice. What is so bad about this? But if you think of it in a user perspective, the only reason I'm looking at a receipt is because I need to know the details of like a purchase, whether I need to know like how much was an item I bought on that receipt, or how much is the total. And I don't know, it has a QR code. Maybe I need that QR code to scan. So if you think about it, from the moment I open this app and this animation happens to the moment I get to see everything, that's like a full 3 seconds. And I ain't trying to wait 3 seconds for me to just find out how much was my t-shirt Lacoste. Oh, that's like French for cost. I think, yeah, the cost of like a t-shirt, I'm not waiting 3 seconds for that stuff. That's way too long from a user standpoint, and horrible user. Oh, Lacoste is a brand. Yeah, I wouldn't know. Sorry. That was my bad. Yeah, anyways, it's a really long animation, and that's not the point. It's not the reason why a user is there. They're not there to see this really cool card flip animation. And yeah, it's just defeats the whole purpose of the content of the receipt, of the purpose of a receipt. So overall, this is really bad design. I highly recommend you look into like this article that is written about this, that Asia link. So Asia made these slides and she taught it last semester. So by no means am I very good at this stuff. So if you have any questions, please ask Asia. So yeah, and also Julia and Bianca are good resources too. So yeah, overall, very bad design. If it was just the receipt design with no animation, this would have been great. But simply because the animation is there, it's just like, why should I wait this long for stuff I need to see? So yeah, like I said, animations should not be the main attraction of your application, your website, whatever you're designing. That's not the goal of a website, unless you're like designing a website specifically catered for the topic of animations, then that's a different story. But like for the most part, you're there to show something, and users are there to get something out of your website, whether it's a shopping website, your personal website, things like that. It's not because you want to show off how cool your animations can get on a website. And this is something that often new designers really get carried away by. They find something like really fancy, like, oh shoot, I can do like, I can move something, make something move continuously on the website. And it's like, it's great. And I'm going to make everything move now. And it's so cool to show off that I know how to do such things with technology. But that kind of like defeats the purpose of design, because you're straying away from the original purpose of what your website or your application is about. And so generally the best use of animations are for loading screens, assisting in user experiences, and creatively expressing ideas. And we emphasize the fact that it should be used sparingly and in the right places, and you should let the content speak for itself. Like a good design should not need any fancy stuff to enhance its experience. A good design is because the content is there and it's readable. It's a good interface for users to understand without much confusion or without any confusion. You don't need an animation to like make it a good design. Like that doesn't really exist. You can add an animation to enhance the experience, but even if you take it out, it shouldn't like affect the whole overall feeling or the experience of your website. So again, let the content speak for itself. Do not stray away from the purpose of your website. So here we have an example of like, we're at a website just changing tabs. And because like the content area is so big, it's when we change tabs, it's such a big jarring like change on our page. It just changes like suddenly when we hover over a different tab or we click on a different tab. And this is something that it's okay, but because like this section of content is so massive, it might need something a little bit more subtle to like adjust, have users to like, I don't know, adjust their eyes to or something. Because right now it's just like way too fast. It changes so fast that like you're like, oh, whoa, I didn't expect that, you know. Um, on the other hand, if we add kind of like an animation in between, you can, this is a little bit extra and still pretty slow in my opinion, but this kind of gives you the vibe of like flipping through a magazine kind of thing, because it's so image heavy with like very little text, but it's way better than what you had in the previous slide where you're like changing between tabs and then it just suddenly changes and you're just like, whoa, I was caught off guard. But this you kind of expected. I'm like more or less like, oh, I'm reading magazines, flipping through, and it's that time to like flip a page, you know. So this allows users to be more prepared for what's going to happen, you know, because as you can clearly see, it's pretty nice. Again, it's kind of slow and a little bit extra. You could probably like change it and make it faster, but overall, it gives users like some sense of like breathing room, a time to like breathe before they go on to the next page or whatever. So yeah, I mean, in the scope of your midterm project, your changes should be totally fine. We don't even expect you to know this even for the final project, because animation changes between pages are pretty hard. Especially when like you have to start dealing with like network stuff, and then like loading animations. These things are a little bit too complicated, but animations do add some really cool perspective or personality to a website. And so how you design these, like these, or prototype, mock up these animations, there's a really good resource called Envision, and it's very similar to Figma. It's a mock-up tool, but it allows you to design like really, really nice animations. And I believe you could also export them and then use it on your websites without even having to do like CSS or whatever. So again, it's really similar to Figma, and it's free too. Normally you have to use Sketch, and that's like pretty expensive without a academic license or whatever. And yeah, so Envision is a really great resource to basically design those animations that you want. Another great resource is Adobe After Effects. They also do animation design, and it's really, really nice. And especially because this is also free, because we're all at Berkeley and we get the Adobe software for free. So that's definitely make use of that. And this is a really good resource to design those. And again, this one, you could also export them as like an animation itself and put it on your website, and it will animate without you having to write CSS animation at all. But we're not going to like teach you Envision or Adobe After Effects simply because like we already taught you Figma. You don't need to know this for this class. But if you want to look into it, I mean, Google is your best friend. YouTube has a lot of tutorials. It's really good. So definitely look into these if you're interested in like making any, I don't know, animations in the future. We have a question: will they make the website slower? What do you mean? Like if you export like an animation, will it make it slower? Like performance wise or loading wise? If you use too many animations, yeah, it depends. It's like loading, you know, a big file, right? It might take a while to open. And because websites are essentially files, like an HTML file, it might be pretty slow at some point, depending on how good of quality your animations are. Which is why CSS animations is pretty good. Like it shouldn't, no matter how many animations you add, like you'll never reach the point where it's like you have so many animations that your website is just so slow, unless your animations are just so drastic that like your computer just can't, its graphics processor just can't process that animation. So but you should never hit that case when it's just that point. So that's why CSS animations is always very good. So yeah, does that answer your questions? That might have been an off tangent thing, but cool. So awesome. Let's move on to talk about some aesthetics. You know, we always talk about aesthetics. Oh, things look nice. That looks nice. This looks nice. It's aesthetic. But in the concept of this class, we want to talk about aesthetics through branding. So again, Asia made these slides to really talk about like emphasize the fact about branding and how branding can bring personality to a lot of different websites. And I also mentioned this with like the image lecture last week, yeah, something like that. And yeah, so let's just get like a quick recap of like what we learned over the past couple of weeks in our design lectures about branding. So what are some things we know already? So here we have a couple of things we've already taught you: color scheme, typography, images and graphics, and layouts. These are things that we've taught you through the past weeks. And if you can type in the chat, like when we should use these, how to like utilize these topics to get like something with personality, like, I don't know, like just answer how to get personality from these kinds of design concepts. Whether, yeah, just list it out in the chat, or any other like design concepts that's not on this slide. Like when would you use it to make things look nice? When would you use it to get personality on your website, et cetera, et cetera. Anyone? Damn, really? No one? Typography for the overall mood, like serif versus sans serif. Yeah, exactly. Typography and fonts. That's really important because you got to choose the right fonts to use. And each font has its own type of personality that it kind of exudes alone. And then with a combination of your website, it can combine into something really nice. So good job. That's a good use of typography for personality websites. Layout for white space to enhance readability. Yes, readability is always very important, whether or not you have personality on your website, because that's like step one of just having a good website in general. Anyone else with like color scheme or images and graphics? How do they play into having like personality on a website? Well, I mean, I'll talk about color scheme. Color scheme, it's very simple. Just choose the right colors. Have a good color palette. It's not that complicated, although it's pretty hard at first to choose the right color scheme. But that's something you can use to get personality out of. Like, don't choose like the color of the rainbow to like add into your website. Just choose like 2 or 3 max, and boom, you got a website that's very personalized with a couple colors. Same thing for images and graphics. They're visual stuff. Like I talked about last week in the images lecture, they alone can exude a lot of personality, and you don't have to like do much with it to add a lot to your website. And so with all of these like concepts, along with the other ones that's not mentioned on this like slide, you already have a lot of powerful tools to really design really personalized websites. Whether it be your personal website for a final project, or like a boba website, a baking website, whatever you design in the future, as long as you keep these like design principles in mind, you're on like the right track for a very good looking website. So yeah, with that, we're also going to throw in motion with it, because motion does have, or animations also have, a lot of personality in it. So what is brand personality theory? Honestly, I didn't know this until like today, because again, this slide was made by Asia, and she used to be an econ major, and she learned about this a while back, about brand personality theory. But basically, an analogy she talked about before was that like, if you're meeting people, or like trying to make more friends, like how can you as a person be the most, like make a really good impression as a likable person and a nice friend? That's kind of like the analogy that Asia used to talk about brand personality theory. So brand personality theory is more in the context of companies. How can I, as a company, kind of sell you this product, but kind of be your friend at the same time, so that you are likable? This company is very likable. So as I guess Asia puts it, it's like some parasocial bond between customer and company. Um, yeah, so I don't know, think of it like Apple or something. Why is it that every year they come out with $1,000 iPhone and yet we throw money at their face like it's nothing? Like, why is it that it's a phone that's $1,000? That's insane. Normally, like Google Pixel phones are like 400, and yet we still pay for the $1,000 phones. Why is it that we always go to Apple? Is it because their product is nice, they have a nice design, or their company does good things, like they have like carbon or environment friendly like processes and manufacturing iPhones? I don't know. It could be anything that plays into brand personality theory and also brand equity. This is very important when you think about whether like you're working in a company, starting a company, or just even something as simple as like making an app when you're starting off as yourself, like you're making it by itself. So I know there's a lot of technical stuff we talked about. So the best way to learn about this is through examples. And I'm going to show you a ton of different websites and compare and contrast them with each other. So first is a fintech company that you've definitely seen before because we all love this site. I hope you love this site because, Stripe is just such a great website. It's such a nice design. And the reason why we like Stripe so much is not because of like, oh, like, this gradient moves, right? It's good. This is motion, a use of animation or an image or a GIF in the background, but it's so subtle. It's very subtle. I'm not going to be distracted, although I don't know why it's covering the words. That's sometimes a little bit too much, but it doesn't take my attention away from the main content, which is why this text is so big. And then I might read this smaller paragraph later on. And as we scroll, we see like a lot of different uses of motion on the website, or supposed to. Oh yeah. See, like some very small uses of motion. And again, it's not this is the content. I'm not taken away or distracted by anything on this website. Here they even have an animation of like someone typing code. That's so cool. Although it might be a little bit slow because I want to see what the whole code is about, but overall, it kind of really relates to how like a programmer codes. And then I don't know, there's a lot of different things. This is more personalized. You could drag this around that I just found out like the other day. This is crazy. What a freaking amazing website. And then you have like just these small motion things. That's very scarce use of animations, but smart use of animations or motions in general. Because again, I emphasize this a lot, do not take the attention away from the main goal of a website. And so that's why we love Stripe so much as a website, like design wise. I mean, of course, they're fintech company that's basically based on like a payment system, but yeah, it's great. Second, we have Robinhood. I'm sure you've heard this in recent news. If you haven't, I don't know what you're on, but yeah, Robinhood is another fintech company, and if you have stocks, go you. If you have GME, go you. I hope it's going well for you. But yeah, this is more, I guess, geared towards like younger people because we as young people are more likely to invest in like trends. You saw that literally like the past couple of months, whether it be in design, like typography, the color scheme, and then even just like again, motion is very important on this website. Not too like it's not going to take my attention away from the text itself or me reading the text, but it's enough for me to understand what like the main purpose. Again, humans are visual learners, and so like I'm kind of attracted towards these animations, but not so much that I'm only focusing on them the whole time. So again, Robinhood has its own take of personality and motion, and through this website, it kind of like again reaches out to the younger generations, telling us to invest in stocks or like invest in our future, things like that. Yeah, be careful with these things, but yeah, next up we have Zoom, and I mean, everyone knows Zoom, but this site is very different. It's very, very different from Robinhood because like you can clearly see it's very muted colors. It's white. It's this interesting, I don't know what this color is, navy blue-ish, darker navy bluish. but their website is more like professional related because Zoom is a video conferencing application. And so they want to keep it professional. This is why their use of icons and their uses of colors and also their typography is very, very professional related. And like with these like people images, it gives you kind of like a company style vibe because that's what they're trying to get at. This is the audience that they're reaching out to because Zoom is all about making like remote, I guess, meetings together at your in front of you, and most of that happens in a company kind of or corporate kind of style environment. So this is their take of their design. But on the other hand, we have Discord website, which is, I mean, for those of you on our Discord, and for those who don't know what Discord is like a voice channel. It's like Slack plus like voice channels, but it's mainly used for gaming. And so this, of course, gaming is very geared towards younger generations. And so they have this, the opposite take of Zoom, where it's like their design is focused around bright colors, really, really interesting like uses of images. I'm sure like these are all references from games or something. And even as you scroll, like there's a lot of, even though there's not much motion in here, it still exudes a lot of personality, saying that, oh, this is something that like me as like a college student probably would use. Zoom, maybe not so much. Like I actually probably wouldn't have heard of this without like COVID happening. But Discord, like this is something like mostly everyone's on if you're like pretty big in like the gaming like environment. Yeah. And so you can see, although like Zoom and Discord have like similar functionalities, like they do like voice and like video calls and also like text, this stuff, they have two different takes on it because their branding is very important to how they show and portray their image on the websites to the public. And then we also have like Vogue. Honestly, I guess it's like a fashion website. I don't use Vogue at all. So this is pretty new to me, but like coming into Vogue, you just clearly see a lot of different kind of vibes where we use serif fonts. And so gives you more of like, oh, this is like a fancier type of like vibe that, of course, fashion has to do with like being good looking and like all this kind of like trendy stuff, but also pretty fancy at the same time. And this honestly gives me kind of like a New York Times kind of feel just because of the font and everything. And also is very image heavy. And they also use a lot of different like motion things here and there just to give some sort of, I guess, like edginess to their website to make it stand out a little bit more. And then also, lastly, we have Elle, which is like the same thing. And they have like the same business model as Vogue, although they have a different take of their website. This is more of like, kind of like a blog style website based on how their layout is structured. Of course, they also have some motion in it here and there, but overall the personality gives a very like bloggy kind of style whereas like Vogue is like, honestly, it's like very similar structure wise, but they have kind of like different takes on the same business model. So overall, personality is everything in a website, and you have all the creativity. You are not limited by anything when you design a website. Like I would highly encourage you, like when you go on a website, understand its personality, understand what components on their website makes it so that you're kind of drawn to it. You often go back to it because once you really find those things, you start to learn what you as like a user, you as a customer is more likely to do, because you are probably like the rest of us as customers, as users. We are always drawn to certain things, every single one of us, because we can see things, we can hear things and things like that. So once you really understand those concepts, you will get a better grasp of what I should design, how I should design, and like what components go where, and then the more nitty-gritty stuff like that help with like user experience and user interface, these kinds of things. So again, look at like really nice websites or just even bad websites. They're also helpful to show you what not to do, things like that. As long as you understand why it's good or why it's bad. So yeah, that's basically the end of the uh, design lecture. Are there any questions about this section, this half? Yeah, like I said, Asia made these slides and she basically taught this lecture last semester. And so I'm kind of like just lecturing today for Julia. Again, please ask her if you have more advanced questions about these things, because I'm probably not the best for this. Like I'll help, but probably not as much as Asia. Cool. With that, I guess we could just take a short break and then Asia will take over for programming in a sec.
So, yeah, Howie just talked about CSS, or like he just talked about how to use motion to add more personality to your sites. And he talked about all the design things that you can incorporate in your site to make it flow better and to make it more visually interesting, to like really bring out different characteristics. But I'm going to talk about how to actually implement that kind of on a more basic level, and then you should get a good idea of how to expand it into how to make more complicated things, or at least get a good idea on where to start. So yeah, like he said, animations can create a really nice dynamic website, as you can see in this GIF. The motion of it really adds to the overall flow and, you know, the enjoyment of the site. You already talked about all of that. Yeah, adds to the personal expression of the brands, or even ourselves if it's for like a portfolio or something. It, like how an image is 1,000 words, like moving images are even more than that. So just like the semantic power of motion can be really strong, is just the overall theme of this. So yeah, all animation is a change of state over time. So the way to think about it, kind of with this switch that's showing, is like, what is the starting state and what is the ending state? For example, the starting state is like the green towards the right, and then the ending state might be the gray to the left. And it can be just as simple as that, like a light switch. So yeah, most of this can be done in CSS. Super complex ones got to be done using the help of JavaScript, but most of them can be done in CSS. So here's the kind of overall format of doing an animation in CSS. So use the @keyframes tag. So then you name it where the name thing goes here. And then you put the rules in. And the rules are basically what happens during the animation. And we'll get back to the idea of like, how should it start? How should it end? And that's kind of what goes into the rules. And this is basically where you define what the animation is, and then you can apply it to something later in the CSS, as you'll see. So the first way to do it is using from and to. So from is the starting point and to is the ending point. So for example, we have here the animation code for fade in, which basically makes something go from 0 opacity, so hidden, to being fully visible with opacity 1. And then we can write something sort of similar if you ignore the middle line here at 50%, and you make the 100% one. You can use 0% and 100% for the same thing as from and to, is basically what I'm trying to say. But using percentages 0 to 100% allows you to add additional complexity, because you can add more steps in between. So for example, we want this to fade in and out. So instead of just going 0 to 1, it goes to 0 to 1 in less time, and then it fades back out again. So yeah. Another example of this is you can make something go up and down. So rather than just going up once, you want this to happen, like do a full loop within the animation. So 0%, it goes up, 50% it comes down, and 100% goes back up again. So this is kind of a more complex visual of how you can use these ideas to make something more elaborate. So basically the start 0%, mid 50%, you got to think about what the different steps are in the process, but you don't have to worry necessarily about how it gets there. And it's actually really nice because this works in the same way as a lot of animation software. So if you're making it, like if you're designing your website using design software, this is one thing that does actually mimic how it's being coded. So you don't have to write like every percent that it goes through between 0 and 100, as I'm sure you've noticed. The website and the browser will already know how to interpret that and lead you through beginning to end. So yeah, applications of this. So how to use your keyframe. So you can, in using the animation that we just wrote. So you put in the element of your choice and use the name that you chose. And you can see over here, up, down, which I discussed before, is the animation that we wrote. And you want to apply it to potato head, which is this purple circle. So then in the section for potato head, or for this circle, you would call the ID or like put it in that section with everything else that's happening with it. You can give it, you can say what the, oops, you can say what the name is and which calls this section that you wrote, and then say how much time it has to do it in, which is the duration. And then there are a bunch of other adjustments you can make to it other than which animation and how much time, as I'll go over in a second. So yeah, these are the two required properties, but then you can add other ones, and you usually do, to make the animation a little bit more natural. Because as you can see, this is a fairly simple one. It's just going up and down. So then there's a bunch of other ones, and here it is all listed out. There's also the timing function, which is basically a function that is applied to your code that you don't really have to worry about. They're just a bunch of presets that can change the flow of the movement. So it'll change the speed that it's moving at, so that it doesn't just stay at the same speed the whole time. It will change speed depending on what part of the animation it's in, or like how much time has gone. And it just can make things feel more natural, as we'll talk about later. So yeah, here's all the different graphs that kind of show visually what happens. And there's a site that you can go to that actually has the entire list. This is only part of it. But essentially how it works is, for ease in sign, it starts, the speed increases quickly, first slowly, and then increases more and more quickly as time goes on. Then for ease out sign, the opposite happens. So it's increasing speed quickly, and then it slows down more and more towards the end of the animation. And thinking about it this way, the way gravity works and the way we perceive how things move, like a water droplet versus a ball bouncing. Those might have very different visuals. Or like if you throw something, that might have a different perception of how that looks like versus dropping something, which is weird because physics, but the way that they're perceived because of visual optical illusions, essentially. These help out with that and make things make more sense or just look prettier. So then another one is delay. So between iterations of the animation, if you, because you can see here, you can be like, oh, after this animation is triggered, how long after I trigger it do I want this to occur? So if you want it to be immediate, it's just 0, which I think is just auto, basically. But maybe after you click something, you don't want the animation to happen immediately, so you can delay it by some number of seconds. So after you click it, maybe like 10 seconds afterwards, there's confetti or something. Just an example. So then play number, pretty self-explanatory. How many times do you want this animation to occur? Do you want it to be twice, or do you want it to happen for the rest of time after it's triggered? And then direction is, do you want it to play forward, so 0% to 100%, or you can have it reverse and goes 100% to 0. So yeah, writing it all out, each line like this, takes up a lot of space. So if you're like me, you'll like putting it in a shorthand, and you can just do it all in one line. And sorry, I keep doing that. And here's the order. It goes name, duration, speed curve, delay, play number, and then direction. And that should just, and knowing that only the first 2 are required means that whichever ones of the following that you include are optional. BS. If you have multiple repetitions of your animation, sometimes you want your animation to end in a certain state. So like maybe where it ends in the animation isn't necessarily where you want it to end afterwards. Like if you continue scrolling on the site after the animation has ended, you can use this special property fill mode that doesn't go in this fancy shorthand line to be specific about what the animation should look like. Yes, also to read out chat for the people who are watching the recording. Howie mentioned that an important note is that you don't need to specify all of the properties in the single liner animation thing, which is this line. Like it, if you only want to specify the name and duration, which are mandatory, and then one other thing, that's all you have to write. And it'll still render properly. So yeah. There are a bunch of other ways that you can use, or like, yeah, this is how you use the animation. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've given a lecture. You can use it in pseudo selectors. So then the animation is responding to the user's action, like I mentioned. So if they're hovering on something, if they're clicking on something, then you can use the transition property to determine how much time the speed curve, pseudo selector, etc., to determine the states. Like you can just put it the same rules that we've talked about in here. And then you can also do it the way that we have been talking about it. So you define the keyframe and you put the rules in, and then you attribute it to one of the divs or objects that you have created. And it gives you more control over the timeframes and animations and lets you be a little bit more complex about it. So essentially, doing it through the pseudo selector or through hover, clicked, etc., is just kind of a shortcut way to add small animations that don't require this complexity. So now we're going to do a demo. So if you're watching the recording, I hope you try and figure this out before you watch me do it. And actually, for those who are here, I can give you a little bit of time to try to do this on your own without me as well. So I know that wasn't enough time to go through everything, but I'm just going to start working on it for the sake of time because I know we're over already. So yeah. So first we want to write. Oh, I put it in the wrong place. First, we want to define the animation for the pumpkin. So I'm going to say bounce, the name. And let's use from and to first. So we know that the starting state, we want it to be up here. So we're going to do, because it says we want to translate its Y value from negative 200 pixels to 30 pixels. So let me look at chat. Oh, yeah, I haven't told you 30. I just am afraid I'm not going to finish this on time. But yeah, so that's the from. And then we know that we want it to go to 30 pixels. So then the to, conveniently enough, the way that you think of how something is going to move is already kind of in the language of from and to, which makes this a little bit easier to remember. So yes, we want this to be 30 pixels. So yeah, now we have completed the bounce animation. Yeah, now we want to apply it to this pumpkin. So we're going to go here and we're going to do bounce is the name, and then we want to do the duration. So let's do 0.5 seconds. And then we're going to use the speed curve function that I talked about, ease in, to make the movement a little bit more natural. And then we want there to be no delay and we want it to repeat infinitely. Right? And you can see it's already kind of starting to do stuff. And I want it to alternate directions so that it looks a little bit more normal. And you can see the ease in really did something to make the pumpkin feel like it has weight while it's bouncing. And that is really, the action is happening. And the alternate can also help make the bounce feel more real. So yeah, now because of physics, it's kind of weird that the shadow is the same size, even though the pumpkin is bouncing up and down. So we want to animate the shadow as well. If I have more time after this, I can kind of explore a little bit more what the other speed curves look like. But first we're going to finish what this is. So yeah, now we're going to write the animation for the shadow. And I'm going to call this shadow size. And instead of using from and to, we'll use percents, just because they're the same. Just so you have a little bit of an idea on how to use both. And we want to change the scale a bit this time. So we want to do transform 0.5 from this. From this description, because we want it to start at half its size and then go to full size. Yeah, so scale 1 brings it back to full size. And now we have our animation for the shadow. So we can do one-liner again. So I want to use the animation shadow size, and I want the duration to be 0.5 seconds as well, so it matches up. And ease in 0 seconds, infinite, so it matches up. So yeah, I don't know why it's not doing the thing. There we go. I accidentally put a space there. So now you can see that the shadow moves in and out and mimics the same size, because when something goes further away from the ground, the shadow gets smaller, and when it comes back down, the shadow gets larger again. Then actually, this is more correct. So as you can see, the different speed curves can affect the way the function looks. So doing ease in and ease out so that they should be opposite instead of the same. So then, since we have some extra time, I'm going to use some of the special functions. I have been told by Howie that Izin is actually correct for the pumpkin, but just for the shadow. But it's just rendered at different times because of this site that we're using. But it looks really nice here, and as you can see, it changes. But let's look if this was linear. You can see that it looks a little off and unrealistic. But we go back to using. Try ease out. Okay, I think I have to spell it differently. So as you can see on the site, the dot, when you roll over it, the dot on the side shows how to do it. So let's use this one. I know it's totally not applicable for this, but just so you know what it looks like. Oops, I pasted the wrong thing. Yeah, so now this looks like it's kind of on a bungee rope or something. But you can see the difference in like the slight subtle differences in how it moves. Makes all the difference in how smooth the animation is. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Let us know if you have any questions.